All right, back to 63, if you're flipping through. Sorry about that. We have Drew Soderberg again.
Proposition 63 is related to firearm regulation and ammunition regulation. So let me provide a little bit of background on that. In California, prohibited persons, such as individuals who have been convicted of felonies and certain misdemeanors, are not allowed to have firearms or ammunition. As a result, firearms dealers are required to request a background check from the state to ensure that individuals who are purchasing firearms aren't prohibited from having them under state or federal law. Prior to this year, the state didn't regulate the purchase of ammunition in a similar way. However, in July, the state enacted legislation to increase the regulation of ammunition purchases. Most notably, the legislation included a requirement that state licensed firearm dealers be required to check that individuals who are purchasing ammunition aren't prohibited persons. The state also enacted other firearm-related legislation in July, such as expanding the current ban on large-capacity magazines, which are magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. Now, some of the provisions of Prop 63, which is seeking to increase the regulation of ammunition and firearms, are largely similar to provisions in the legislation that was enacted in July. For example, Prop 63 included provisions that would require firearms dealers to do background checks before selling ammunition to purchasers to ensure that they're not prohibited, and also expanded the ban on large capacity magazines. There are some technical differences with the way Prop 63 implemented some of those, but they're largely similar to what was implemented in July. However, there are provisions of Prop 63 that are significantly different than current law. In particular, Proposition 63 would create a new court process beginning in 2018 to ensure the removal of firearms from prohibited persons after they've been convicted. In addition, Proposition 63 would increase the penalty for theft of firearms worth less than $950 from a misdemeanor, which is currently punishable by up to a year in county jail, to a felony, which is punishable by up to 3 years in state prison. Proposition 63 would have three primary fiscal effects. First, the new court process for removing firearms from persons after they've been convicted would result in increased state and local court and law enforcement costs that could reach into the tens of millions of dollars annually. Second, the changes that the measure makes in various firearms and ammunition penalties, such as increasing the penalty for theft of a gun, would create state and local correctional costs, but these wouldn't be likely to exceed the low millions of dollars annually. And finally, the measure's changes to regulations, such as of ammunition, could increase state regulatory costs, though these costs would likely be offset by various fees authorized by the measure.
So in support, we have the Democratic Party of California and other Democratic organizations oppose the Republican Party, Libertarian Party, and Peace and Freedom Party. In support, we have gun organizations, physicians, League of Women Voters, medical associations, emergency response doctors, Courage Campaign, Equality California, Stop Our Shootings organizations, so lots of those. There are cities that have come out in support. In opposition, we have gun rights organizations, the National Rifle Association, and other special interest gun organizations. You're reading the same thing I'm reading, yeah. All right. And then public officials, we have Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, Alex Padilla, Tony Atkinson, so some, the major Democratic politicians in the state, local officials, law enforcement officials. And then in opposition, we have sheriffs, and split on the newspaper endorsements. And then the expenditures are almost $5.6 million for yes, and about $500,000 for no. The Democratic Party is the biggest contributor in favor of this, and Gavin Newsom is the second biggest. Sean Parker from, which company? Facebook and Napster, thank you. And so Silicon Valley. And then on the no side, we have gun organizations, the NRA, and citizens organizations having to do with guns. Questions on this one? In the very back, all the way back.
Has there been any fiscal analysis done of the reduction in funds to, I think it's called the Pittman-Robertson, the conservation fund from the sale of firearms and ammunition?
We didn't conduct that fiscal estimate because it wasn't exactly clear how this would impact firearms sales.
In the middle, okay, there you go.
Does this also affect weapons or firearms made pre-1900?
There are quite a few exemptions to various portions of it. Whether those are part of the exemption, I'd have to look at the measure to be sure. I'm not sure offhand.
Others? In the sort of back behind that, yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that this is an initiative statute and that you also said the legislature, the legislature enacted a similar law earlier this year. So can you tell us what the difference is between, with respect to the ability to change the statute? Can you tell us what the difference is between an initiative and something that is passed by the legislature and signed by the governor?
Yeah, absolutely. So the measure, generally to change an initiative measure, you'd have to go back to the voters, particularly if you're changing it in a way that isn't consistent with its intent, whereas the legislature would be able to change the laws that it enacts.
Thank you.